Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this Coach's Corner thing we're doing, where coaches and trainers talk about the things that you guys are concerned with. This is our second episode. We got some really good feedback on the first episode, so I'm excited to talk some more about recruiting issues with people who know. Again, Mike, Scott, and I will just take these things on in kind of a free-flowing way. So, but first, Mike, I know you just got back from vacation, so here's what I'm dying to ask, because we've all been in the business so long. Like, I'm horrible on vacation. I think most recruiters are, as far as disconnecting. Like, I was in Italy like a month and a half ago, and I'm 6 hours ahead of everybody. So I'm waking up in the morning and I'm sending people emails and texts about situations and checking on numbers. And, they're getting them at 1 o'clock in the morning. So later I'm getting a text saying, can you just leave us alone while you're in Italy, please? Can you just don't email me at 1 o'clock in the morning? Are you able to disconnect, Mike? Are you gone when you're gone, or are you one of these people that checks while you're at the beach obsessively with your sand-covered iPad?
I forget how to spell recruiter when I go away.
No kidding.
Not that I don't check it's like I don't want to go that I go totally off the grid, but even running my own recruiting firm, I got to the point where, and especially early on when I began managing remotely or going on vacation, you couldn't get access to email that easily. There wasn't the iPhone yet and all that other stuff. So you really had to make an effort to go check email. And, I think this happens with most people. The first couple of days, you're a little like, and then I could completely let go. And I was truly blessed in my recruiting firm. And now at the Recruiter U, we have a great team, and they're actually more productive when I'm gone. Right. So,
right.
Because we measure everything, we talked about this last time by interviews, and every recruiter knew what they needed to do to hit their financial goals every day. So It wasn't like, okay, Mike's not here, we can screw around. They're working for themselves. Right. And I would come back and production, worst case, stayed the same and went up. And for me, what I learned this, my first sales job out of college, when I disconnect for a period of time, I come back with a ton more energy.
Right.
And I can hit it harder. And then again, being blessed with great teams is I don't have to worry about, I don't obsess about the minutia.
What about you, Scott? Are you able to do that too?
I'm able to go on what I call a light version of a vacation. So if we go to Disney, I'll wake up early, check my emails, send stuff out. And it also depends on what my candidate and deal flow is like, because I don't have a team of people. It's just myself, one colleague that recruits and supports me, and our marketing person, and that's it. And so usually I'll spend maybe 30 minutes early in the morning sending off emails, just making sure things are cooking, and then I'm done. I check out. However, I do check texts, and if I've got a deal in play, I'll tell candidates and clients, text me if it's urgent, and I'll respond. But one thing I'm really good at, Danny and Mike, is on the weekends, I disappear from recruiting.
Yeah.
I go deep. I have a closing ritual where I close out my week Friday afternoon, and I set certain goals each week. So for me, it used to be leaving early on a Friday was quitting around noon. Now it's quitting around 4 o'clock. And so, but because I like it, and I found that some of the best calls I have with candidates or clients are Friday afternoon. Everybody's in a good mood. They've got a little bit more time. And so I found I had my closing ritual Friday, and I disappear. I don't have to think about it. I once had a coach, Dr. Ken Christian. He passed away years ago, but he was my coach. And I told him, I said, I'm afraid that if I don't think about my deals all the time, they're not going to close.
Right.
And he said, that's superstitious. And I said, so? And then he told me, he said, that's superstitious and you're wearing yourself out. And he said, have a closing ritual on Friday. Allow yourself to touch it once on Saturday. So I'll look at my deal sheets, usually 11:30 Saturday morning, look at it for 5 minutes. There it is. Good. I'm getting ready to start the Saturday with my wife and daughter. And then Sunday, I'll usually touch it once. Okay, what are the goals that I have? I might do some light planning Sunday night, maybe no more than 20 minutes, and then I check out again. And I found that I'm able to get away. And I think that if you look at when we cut the skin, the point where it cuts, it heals back in scar tissue that's stronger. You break a bone, the bone break point is stronger. You lift weights. Danny, I know you lift weights. I know you break down the muscles. You can't work the same muscle groups 2 days in a row. Why is that? Because when you're healing, that's when you're gaining strength.
Yeah.
And when you take that time away and you got to plan for it, whether it's long vacations and maybe someday I'll take long vacations. I daydream about having your life, Mike, and taking a month off. Someday I will, and I think you got to get away mentally at least.
Oh, I think that, yeah. Okay. No, I agree with you, but I just don't like you guys as much as I did before this call started, because I just have never been able to do it. But you're 100% right, Scott. It's that whole idea of if I obsess about it, then I'm paying my dues and somehow good things will come my way. Well, when in reality, you're just exhausted.
One thing, Danny, you write. Yeah. You're a prolific writer.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why I paint. I'm a watercolor artist and an oil artist. Winston Churchill wrote a book called Painting as Pastime. And he said, you can't just say, I'm going to sit here and not thinking about anything. You got to have your mind going in a direction. It can't be about work.
Right.
And so the fact that you write, Danny, that takes you away from it, or at least for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the point. Getting away from it in some way for a little bit. I remember at one point, a couple winters ago, I had to speak in Florida, and there was this freak hurricane kind of thing, and the airports were closed and I couldn't fly back. And so I spoke on Saturday. The airports still weren't open on Monday. So I called Lisa, my general manager, and I said, hey, I am so sorry. And I didn't call her till like 10 o'clock because I was trying to get out. So it's already 10 o'clock and I'm thinking everybody's freaked out about where I am. So I called Lisa and I said, hey, listen, here's what happened. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but I can't get out. And she wasn't trying to be funny. She just said to me, oh, I didn't know you were gone. And I was like, oh, okay. Maybe I'm not as indispensable as I really think I am. I've actually been gone since Thursday, but thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I think especially in the summer, that's worth the audience hearing, because everybody's going to go on vacation and everybody's freaking that they're going to come back to a dead desk. And that's what everybody is afraid of. And yet if you don't go, then you're going to be exhausted. I mean, look at Mike, tan, happy guy. Wow, impressive. All right, so let's get into what we wanted to talk about today. So here's what I see over and over again. I'm sure, Mike, you do at Recruiter U. Everybody's pushing BD. I don't think anybody argues that it's a tougher market. I say that even though the last 4 months here have been really, really strong. So I'm starting to wonder if this is still true. But everyone, and according to Danny, says, we're all BD focused. We're not getting as many jobs as we used to. And they're holding people to metrics. Okay, you're supposed to get 2 job orders this week. And if you make X amount of calls and you send out X amount of emails in this cadence, you should get X amount of job leads. Those should convert at this rate. And let's see by Friday whether you have 2 job orders. It almost seems like you're guaranteeing this do loop will happen, where the recruiter will now say, okay, pressure to get jobs. So they follow up on a posting that's in their niche and try to get some HR or talent act person to, quote unquote, give them the lead. Or they even do make MPC calls and they get a hiring authority on the phone. And I say this because we hear these calls. The intake is superficial as hell because they're so excited that they might get a lead. It might turn into a job order. They don't get much information. The terms are lame when they get to the fee. They get talked down as far as fee. They get talked up as far as guarantee. They get off the phone and say, great, I got a job order, without any concept of how low or high quality the job is. They then can't find a candidate for the job because they don't have much to say to the candidate. The candidate's already working and they don't seem to be offering much. And so they can't find candidates for this really bad job. And then they call at 1.2 weeks later and they say, we're good. We've already got 5 candidates. And so their manager's mad at them because they didn't get any activity on jobs. And the recruiter is thinking, but I got the jobs you told me to get. I did what you told me to do. So I want to talk a little bit about that psychology, that psychology of the recruiter pressed to get jobs, and then forced in their mind to qualify in a very sort of superficial way because they're just trying to hit a numbers, and kind of circle back to what is the proper intake and how do we help this recruiter. Does that land with you guys? Do you see that as well?
Absolutely. I was talking to some clients earlier in the year, and I think what I heard from, I talked talking to yourself and talking to some other people that have exposure to a good part of the industry, people are saying down 10, 15%. And that didn't include June. But then I started hearing, Danny, what you're experiencing. Geez, June was pretty good. July's looking pretty good, right? So maybe, I don't know, there's really no great economic indicator for perm placement where we can point to it to get specific data points. But having said that, I remember them saying early, well, we're getting openings, but the fish aren't jumping in the boat like they did a year or two ago, right? So we actually have to expend effort. And one of the things we really work on with our clients, I did this in my office, in an office environment, if someone took a job order, good economy, bad economy, we had a meeting on Monday morning, we called it Defend Your Deal, right? So Danny, you're sitting there and go, I got to search for a sales rep in Chicago. And then, 10 and 15 of us would ping the heck out of you. What about terms, urgency, like all the things that we know are important, because if they're going to launch their ship and invest time and effort, we wanted to make sure it was a workable deal, right? And we were huge. We call taking a job order a diagnostic.
Yes.
Right. Prescription without diagnosis is recruiting malpractice. I learned that from Rob Mosley. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we really got into it doing diagnosis without whatever. I got it right. Prescription without. Yes. We got really into doing great diagnostics, envisioning ourselves as physicians, poking you, prodding you. Is this pain worth enough for you to get reconstructive surgery? Or is it just kind of now, because some companies are a little bit, they want to hire, but they're getting some pressure financially. Do you really need this position refilled? And what are the consequences for this position remaining open a month, 2 months? And if they can't really come up with any, it's probably not a good job order.
Yeah, and Scott, I'd be interested in your take on this, because when I've heard you speak, you've always come across with this sort of, I don't want to over-exaggerate and call it swagger, but what I always liked, what I heard from you is that you're going to go into this potential job order almost expecting it not to work out. Like, I probably am not going to be able to help you. I'm a consultant. I've got a lot of business, and you said you have an opening. I'd like to help you. I always look for new business. But most of the time, I get the sense that these things are not worth my time. But I'm happy to figure it out. So let me ask you some questions. And that always stuck with me, because I think the system we have of make X amount of calls and go get 2 job orders under this week's a bad week if you don't do that. So the message from the management, the guys that are writing your checks, is go get a job. And then the educational tactic that seems to work is act like you don't need the job. Act as if you got 50 jobs and be tough on this intake. Instead, I hear just the opposite. I hear people begging on intakes. Can you talk a little bit about your sort of approach to that, Scott?
Absolutely. And I was actually taking some notes here on some other thoughts I had related to this issue, because I think this is in many ways a strategy issue.
Yeah.
But getting to what you mentioned, Danny, there's actually a psychological, not a disease, but this psychological thing where, and I can't remember the name of it, people actually think they look a lot worse than they really do. I grew up having just the opposite. I thought I was better looking than I really was. I thought I was smarter than I really was.
Oh, you should have called me. I would have corrected you.
Even though I could. And I thought, and I was always willing to take a shot. And when I got into legal, I'm just going to act like I know what I'm doing. And I remember my very first client meeting with managing partners and leaders of a big firm. And I didn't know what to say. So I got really good at asking questions. Yeah. And I realized at that moment that people are making a judgment about you based on the quality of questions that you ask. And so I think that this is a strategy issue. Many times you have to figure out what type of search work are you doing. Are you doing retainer search work? Are you doing high dollar contingency, or are you doing matchy? Where, okay, here's a posted opening. There's 100 of these posted openings. There's about 5,000 candidates. I'm going to get some candidates and shove them in there before somebody else does. And that's a legitimate way to make placements. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to figure out what type of search work are you doing. And I always say, don't call it a job order, call it a search assignment. Elevate your language. People make an impression about you based on the language that you use. I did a coaching and training session for a company. They're talking about MPC marketing. It doesn't work anymore like it used to. And I said, that's because you're at the pool on July 4th. It's extremely crowded. And 2020, man, the world shut down. 2021, it came back with a vengeance. Everybody said, let's get into recruiting. Everybody's hired. And they're still here. They're still here. I'm waiting for them to leave. But they're still here. So that's why I get calls like this all the time. What you got? And so I think a couple of things you need to do is build in distinction. What can you say about yourself that nobody else can say about you? And sometimes you can build that in. Within my own search practice, I'm like, gosh, it's getting harder for me to make placements. Seems like the longer I do it, the harder it is to do it because I kind of know what I don't know, you know? And so I realized I've got to change things a little bit. I'm going to niche. Instead of doing all things to all people for every firm in every city, I'm only going to do corporate and finance, specializing in private equity in major markets. And I'm only going to work, instead of for 50 firms, 2 or 3 on a long-term retainer deal. And I haven't done long-term retainers since 2013. And so that's another change I made initially, is getting closer to the firms and building in training value, coaching, consulting. That's no extra charge. And by the way, it brings me closer to them. So because I met with the chairman, chief marketing officer, chief strategy officer, now I've got a really good narrative. So I'm going to be more effective at recruiting. And so I think part of it, you can build in your distinction based on your own strategy. What can you say about yourself that nobody else can say about themselves? Well, carve it in your niche. Then I also think thought leadership. I think most people in our industry niche, or in recruiting, they don't think of themselves in professional services. They don't, I don't need to write articles. I don't need to get published. I don't need to build thought leadership. Well, the people that are, those are the ones that are getting the callbacks, because they figured out that not just the thought leadership builds credibility, but that's actually a model of getting clients. I'd like to interview you for an article that I'm writing for your state trade association. By the way, Jenny Smith, the executive director, said I should reach out to you, that you'd be a good source. I'd be happy to quote you if I use what you have to say. You're going to get a call back. Oh, thank you for interviewing me for the article. By the way, you do recruiting. We should talk. Now you're in. So I think people look at business development as one thing, just making a call. I interviewed Gary Miller, 47 years in recruiting. He was on the Rainmaking podcast 2 episodes ago. And he talked about going to trade conferences. There you are, you're getting shrimp off the plate. You're talking next to a guy. Oh, what do you do? I'm a CFO of a manufacturing company. What do you do? Oh, we recruit people in manufacturing. Oh, really? We should talk. It's like going to speed dating. We all know why we're here. Let's just get right to it. Right. And so I think doing the things that all the other professional services providers do to become rainmakers, that works in executive search. And it's an open blue ocean opportunity, because a lot of people within executive search don't really take that seriously. So I think that's what, just like the hokey pokey, that's what it's all about.
So
in my opinion.
Let me get granular there for a second, because I get this question a lot. If you look at traditional BD calls, our mutual friend Peter Lefkowitz calls it a positioning statement, right? I've always called it a credibility statement. And Joanne and I hear so many of these calls now that I'm wondering about its value. In other words, 112% of these calls start with, I'm Scott Love, I'm with this attorney search group, I've done this, I know that, I know this, and I'm, pretty awesome. It makes me crazy. I walk around my office and I hear, I'm Joanne Casero and I'm with Hobson Associates, and one of the oldest and largest privately held search firms in the country. And, I built it and I find that boring. I spent 40 years making that true, and I find it irrelevant. And when you talk about your questioning, I'm wondering if all of these people wouldn't do better. Like, who cares that your firm is in Atlanta? or that Forbes called it, one of the best recruiting firms in Atlanta 4 years in a row. That means you paid Forbes $10,000 is what that means. I wonder if it wouldn't be better if the positioning statement was based on, wow, that was a super sharp question. I'm Scott Love. I'm with an attorney search group. I was just talking to another legal firm, and they found X, and then make some claim or issue or trend or cite some stat that is keeping all of them up at night. Right now, I think it's clear when I talk to owners and managers, for example, owners and managers are besides themselves and struggling really hard because the compensation and commission rates were created 30, 40 years ago at a time when owners had 33% profit margins because there was no internet services, there was no LinkedIn, there was no 401k. And now their margins are shrinking, but God forbid you not pay a recruiter the commission rate he got 8 years ago. There'd be a mutiny, and you don't want to lose the senior recruiter. So if I placed recruiters, or if I sold, comp programs to search firm owners, instead of saying, hi, I'm Danny Cahill, and I started in the business, in the Jurassic era, and here's who I am, here's what I've done, and I'm in Pinnacle. If I just said, hi, I'm Danny Cahill, I work in your industry, and I know your profits are deteriorating, and your comp rates are making you crazy, you want to talk, I just wonder if it'd be more effective, right? Like, I don't know whether the who you are, how long you've been doing it, how big your company is, matters anymore. And it's the first 20 seconds of everybody's pitch.
Permission to be blunt?
Yeah.
Nobody gives a crap.
Right.
Exactly.
And we have data.
That's
So
the secret.
I always because I get in arguments with clients or prospects or whatever all the time. And I like to use data versus my opinion, right? Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Peter's. I used a lot of his stuff earlier in my career. And I think that might have worked a period of time ago. No one cares anymore. And I think, especially if it's a voicemail or an email, people get so many emails, they're reading it, they're reading the first line and they stopped. We've done panels with hiring managers and HR people. They weren't in the room at the same time. They weren't from the same companies. They weren't from the same industries, just random clients bringing in a VP, a C-level, VP of talent acquisition. So we had HR together and we had hiring managers together. We had about 4 or 5 of each. And the room was like, what do we have to do to add value, right? To get you to notice us so that we can earn the right to do business with you. Number one, no disagreement. Everyone agreed with, show us talent. And it's like, that's considered old school, right? So, we've all been brought up on that. It was always a great way to do it. We're measuring the data. It still works. Show us talent. We're even coaching our people in their email, not even to open up with an introduction. Because if I say, hey, Danny, in a recent engaged search, I uncovered a sales rep, 187% of quota. You know exactly what I do. Right. I don't have to say I'm a recruiter, and they don't care where I'm from. Right. It's a VP of sales. I got a guy, and if you want to use specific numbers, not consistently over quota, great communicator, like that's white noise. It's got to be very, very specific and granular. And that will open, and then we use that in both an email and a voicemail and a combo to open the door to a conversation, not to get into an email dialogue about whether this candidate's appropriate or not. But that is still working. I hate to say it, because we're all old in the business, and then we're just like, oh, you don't get it. There's social media. I'm not saying social media doesn't have a role, but we have found that it gets a horrible return call or email rate when you do that. Blustery came over on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria with Columbus, for our search firm in the Caribbean, and moved it to the Northeast. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I think it's a sociological truism that, of course, is offensive to those of us who paid our dues, right? You want to believe your experience has been worthwhile. By extension, you were really saying, doesn't my life matter? Doesn't the fact that I did this for a long time matter? And it's a hard thing to go, well, not really. At least not at the beginning. At least not when I'm trying to figure out which recruiting firm I'm going to work with. What matters is your energy and enthusiasm and passion. And show me some acumen through some good questions, but don't give me, a humble brag about what you've done, how many people you've placed. We hear it all the time. I'm in Minneapolis. Nobody cares. It's a remote society. Nobody cares that you're in Minneapolis. And I placed 37 people at this client if they're recruiting, or I've been in the business 15 years, just absolutely noise. But I think it's important. And I say this, 2 days after crying when Joe Biden withdrew, just as a human thing. It's a human thing to feel bad for the guy, whatever side of the aisle you're on, because you aged out, and it doesn't seem fair if you think you're doing a good job. And it doesn't seem fair to these recruiters that I'm saying to them, look, that first 20 seconds that you've been doing for 15 years and that made you so much money, cut that.
Yeah.
It's very hard for them to hear. I get it. But at some point, you know what? I said this to a senior guy the other week, and he's in a difficult part of the business. He's in software sales, which has been hit hard. The tech sector has been hit hard. But I'm like, dude, I like the rookie's chances because he doesn't know what he doesn't know. He's just coming in every day and just going at it happy and hard. And you're looking for excuses and telling me all the reasons why nobody's going to use you. So youth will be served, dude. Youth will be served. But I understand and I respect how hard a message that is for people to hear.
Well, your experience kicks in. To Scott's point, I couldn't agree stronger. Your experience kicks in with the quality of the questions you ask.
Yeah.
So if you've been in that software sales thing and you've been in it for 15 years, shame on you if you haven't invested part of that time getting to know what their business issues and challenges are.
Yeah.
That some of them that they might not even be aware of, or that they're not even factoring into the hire. Like, with salespeople, I would go, this is a $2 million territory. That's X amount. I go, are you like the average guy out there with about 82% gross margins in software? And they're like, well, yeah, how did you know that? Well, our space, it's plus or minus. Okay. So every week this territory remains open, you're losing $25,000 in profit net of the cost of the salesperson. You ever thought of it that way?
Yeah.
Geez, Mike, I never, these are VPs of sales. They're being held accountable for revenue. Exactly. And then, Mr., is it possible that if you don't get this guy on, if you wait 2 months to save a fee versus 1 month, that I know a lot of those sales, you get a $250,000, or you get $100,000 initial sale as a proof of concept. And then that's going to lead to a $2 or $3 million installation. Does that happen? Well, yeah, that happens. Is it possible that in one of those months you missed out on that opportunity? Not only did you lose the profit for that, but you lost the $3 million sale, and we're sitting here going back and forth over $6,000 in fee.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's when they hear that, and I'm putting it in a statement, but bundled into a question. That's where your tenure comes in. You don't have to say I've been doing this for 16 years. Those questions say I've been around a long time.
Yes, exactly. Your experience is not wasted. It's
Correct.
just not, you just don't front end it anymore. Yeah.
And Mike, I agree with you. And I think what you did, I think that's masterful. I think that adjectives, adverbs, they're vapid. They have no weight. They're opinions. I've got a candidate and I think he's great. Why do you think he's great? Well, because you're going to pay me $70,000 in a fee if you hire him. That's why I think he's great. In fact, anybody that you hire through me, I think is amazing. And so my opinion, I have an agenda. Of course I do. So like you said, Mike, I think using data, specificity builds credibility. Out of the 10 sales reps in his territory, he was consistently ranked number 1 in the last 3 years. In fact, I did a reference check with his previous employer and one of his former clients. And this is what they said. Now you've got Cialdini's principle of social proof interwoven into your presentation. Right. And so I think in today's world of selling and doing client development, I think the puffery of using fancy words and creative language, they don't care. They're looking at their watch. They're on their way to the next meeting. But when you can show that it's almost like relationship selling doesn't work. Nobody cares. It's the phrase of people don't know. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, it's like they don't care how much they know until they know how much you can solve their problem. You have to earn the right to build that relationship. And also, it also depends on what level they are. The higher up you go, sometimes the longer it can take to get that trust. And that's what you're looking for. And what I've noticed is like there's always an inflection point of trust. And it's never like over time we're going to build trust. It's almost like, okay, here it is. And there's a hockey stick. It goes straight up. And you've got the trust. Okay, good. We're in. And once you're in, Now you leverage that trust, introduce me to the chief marketing officer, the other executive people, and you're in. And then you can really do some good work for them. Anyways, I love talking about client development.
Yeah. Oh, well, so here's I haven't been able to talk my general manager into doing this, but I really would if we had more margin for error. If it was the greatest market ever, I would absolutely do this. I would not allow people to follow up postings anymore, with the exception of what Scott was saying about if you're doing, say, contract staffing, or Jen here does admin, so she's going to get 4 times more send outs and 4 times more placements a month than anybody else. So it's a volume business. Following up postings, sending out a bunch of resumes works. That's a different tempo. But when we're talking about the executive search level, and just under, by the way, folks, there's, the retained search firms that are placing people $100,000, $150,000 fees. They don't like those $70,000 fees. They think those are bad jobs. That's your equivalent of an $8,000 fee. So there's this whole upper middle class of executive search that not many people touch, and I would encourage people to go after it. But in my dream scenario, I would literally say it's a fireable offense to follow up postings. Postings are going to get you things too late in the process and open to too much competition. Life isn't that easy. And then the second thing I would do is I would take everybody's LinkedIn recruiter and give them basic LinkedIn. I have found a dozen people that I'm mentoring, 6 of which are in Pinnacle, who got rid of LinkedIn recruiter because they found, A, with the amount of people they have in the database and the lack of response they're getting in InMail, that it was not getting them the value that they thought it was getting before. They didn't miss a beat when they took it away, other than to save the money. But more importantly, they were like, oh my God, I had no idea how much of my quote unquote BD time I never got to because I was just looking at profiles and sending out LinkedIn content and wasting my day, right? Now, if I did that here, I would not be safe. I wouldn't be safe. I don't think I'd survive the day, right? They would be livid here because LinkedIn has done that good a job of making it seem like you can't live without it. If you don't have a recruiter seat, what's the point? But between postings and LinkedIn, I think there's a tremendous amount of wasted time and energy. And if you just went after hiring managers at that upper middle class level with, as we've been saying for this whole episode, with quality questions and making it clear, I know my stuff by the quality of my questions, not by my braggadocio, I think you do great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. On postings, this whole podcast is based on opinions. If you follow up on a posting within a week that it's posted, you're a commodity recruiter perceived by that client. And it's going to be really hard to do all the things when the 3 of us talked about positioning as an expert with great questions. What I tell our clients to do with postings is bank the ones that are appropriate for your niche, wait 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then call in and don't go, I saw your posting, right? It's like a magician, Scott, it's like a magician showing you the card trick. Oh, that was really impressive. No, you just switched decks. Oh, no, that's nothing. So if you have a candidate, you present that candidate, which is a perfect fit or a close match, and they go, how did you know about this opening? This is how I always advise recruiters. How did you find out about me as a candidate? How did you find out about our opening? I'm in this field. It's my job to know that you have an opening. There's no lie in there whatsoever, but I'm not going to tell them I saw it posted a Google alert, and then wait a month, because if it's all the flies have gone away now, right, off of that opening, and now they're probably in pain, right? And if it's filled, you probably weren't going to fill it anyway.
Yep. Agreed. So I was trying to figure out a way to wrap this because obviously these aren't training episodes. So those of you who are saying, okay, guys, but what are those questions and how do we do it, the proper intake? All 3 of us have programs. We're consultants. We're coaches. We'd be happy to help you do that. But let me leave you with another trainer that all 3 of us probably barely remember. But his name was Terry Petra. You guys remember Terry?
Yes.
I thought he was an amazing speaker. People would say, "Oh, he's
Very
he's
smooth.
not- yeah, super smooth." And people always said he was, not as exciting as other speakers. But oh my God, I always came back with 100 pages of notes. So here's what I stole from him that I no longer can do because of the nature of technology. But we're so bad at hiring recruiters. So Terry said he gives people an acid test. Well, what's the acid test? Well, after the first interview, if you really like the recruiter, you bring them back. But, in those days, you were hiring people with no sales experience, and you didn't know whether they would be able to crank out the phone calls. So the acid test that Terry designed was put them in a room. As soon as they come in, don't tell them what you're doing. Make sure there's a phone in the room. And then print out 25 old job orders, something 6 months, a year old. Just put them in a room with a stack of job orders, and you say, these are companies that we used to do business with. You see the title at the top of the job order, quality control manager. Just call this number and ask them if that quality control manager job is still open, and if they filled it, where did they find the person from, and if they have any other openings. And then walk out of the room. And the point was not how well they made the calls. The point was, what do they do? Now, I had people who I would give that stack of job orders to, and they would wait about 30 seconds, then they'd go out and ask them if they could get a cup of coffee, and then they would come back in and they would sit and I'd not move, and then they'd come back into my office and say, can you show me how to use the phone again? I'm not sure which button. And then 5 minutes after that, they come in sweating and say, I can't do this job. So they failed the acid test. But I still have people working for me today who, when I gave them that acid test, 20 minutes later, they came in my office and said, 1, I'm finished. Do you have any more of these? And 2, this guy says, it's funny you called because now we need an X. And we got a job order from them. So I tell you that because it has been amazing to me how bad the industry is at staying in touch with old clients.
Yeah.
People say, well, I don't want to give up the postings. Well, I'll tell you what, if you give up the postings for a month, let's support that and instead call all these companies that we've known for years and just say, hey, you know what, Scott, we haven't talked to you in a long time, but 2 years ago you were looking for a CMO. We just happened to find somebody who has that kind of background, and we just wanted to see if you still had some interest. It isn't going to be, a job order fest, but I guarantee you'll get leads. And it's, to me, time better spent than chasing postings. We are horrible as an industry of staying in touch with the people who already like us. And the number that I saw in the Wall Street Journal that supports this is that 81% of companies that have an opening have more than one opening. So all you got to do is crack that code once, and there's more to it. All this to say, I think sometimes we just overthink this, and sometimes the answer is just get out there and make something happen, listen to people, ask good questions, and be attuned to what they're actually saying. You can't tell me in a world of 4.1% unemployment that it's not out there. It is. We just, I think, get in our own way so many times.
Yeah. Well, it's 4.1%. That's at overall. Then there's the white collar unemployment rate.
Right. Which is
at
lower.
or below 2%.
Right. Yeah. And, you don't want it to go below 2%. Below 2%, you don't want those people to get jobs. Holy God. No, you don't want them working with you. All right, gentlemen, as always, you've been so gracious with your time. Anybody who wants to reach out to Scott and Mike or myself, Joanne will have a link. Let us know what you want us to talk about the next time, and we will all see you soon. Enjoy your vacations.
Have a good one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.